Major breaking news from Kenya and Burkina Faso. What just aired on the Kenya national television has shocked the entire continent. Atop US, General Michael Langley boldly insulted Ibrahim Traore live on air. And people are asking, how was this even allowed? In a shocking and controversial broadcast, Kenya's Citizen TV has found itself at the center of a storm after airing an exclusive interview with the US General Michael Langley, known to many as a vocal critic of Burkina Faso's leader, Captain Ibrahim Traore. The general didn't hold back. Live on air, he hurled a series of strong accusations towards Ibrahim Traore, calling him, in his own words, nothing but a criminal pretending to be a hero. He even claimed that Traore is destabilizing Africa under the mask of leadership, statements that have sparked outrage across social media platforms and in Pan-Africa political circles. Even more disturbing, General Langley openly declared that his plans to arrest Ibrahim Traore are very much alive and might happen sooner than people think. Viewers from across the continent are questioning how a respected Kenya TV station allowed such disrespectful remarks towards a sitting Africa head of state to be aired without balance. Many are calling the broadcast an attack not just on Traore but on Africa dignity as a whole. So far, Captain Ibrahim Traore has not issued a response, but knowing his calm and fearless approach, many believe a powerful reply may be on the way. Across Africa, people are standing behind Traore, praising his leadership, vision, and bold resistance against foreign interference. They are also calling on Africa media to be more careful when giving platform to those whose words may divide rather than build the continent. This is more than just media controversy, it's a wake-up call. Stay tuned to Pan-Africa TV, where we bring you the stories they try to silence.
General Michael Langley is in Kenya for Africa Chief of Defense Conference, but he was not welcomed by Kenyans at all because of what he's been doing to Burkina Faso, to Ibrahim Traore. So he was asked the same questions. Do you stand by what you said about Ibrahim Traore and Burkina Faso? Are you going to apologize to Ibrahim Traore? He said no. He said that he still stands with what he said. Burkina Faso have become worse than it was before Ibrahim Traore became the president. So Ibrahim Traore is overhyped. According to him, Ibrahim Traore is overhyped and nothing is happening. Nothing good is happening in Burkina Faso. Before that, he was asked how many soldiers has US trained in Africa. He said over 50,000 soldiers. And also he was asked, in those 50,000 soldiers, how many of those soldiers have led a successful coup, or how many of those soldiers have led to a coup? He said less than 1%. So the Guinea president became a president through a coup. He was trained and equipped by USA. They are saying they had no idea that he was planning to overthrow the government, even though there are pictures of him and American soldiers celebrating that they got the government. This is why Ibrahim Traore is not interested at all. They are forcing themselves to come to Burkina Faso, and Ibrahim Traore is not interested. And this is why they are saying all these things about Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traore.
You are on African soil, not for the first time, but this would be a good moment to ask about one of the countries that has taken its own autonomy, and that's Burkina Faso. Yeah. Your remarks recently at the Senate seem to suggest that he's diverting, General Traore, is diverting its 4 billion gold reserves to sustain his military rule rather than for public welfare. These remarks sparked widespread condemnation across the continent. What did you mean by that statement?
Let me speak to Burkina Faso's sovereignty. They maintain their sovereignty. They make their decisions how they use their resources. They make their decisions who their resources go to for military support. That's their sovereign right. But my cautionary tale was just from a military perspective. That was a Senate Armed Services Committee asking me a direct question. Burkina Faso, a lot of great things going on to progress them forward, okay? But then when you look at the military part of it, knowing that that's the epicenter of global terrorism, it was my time to illuminate that this is probably their weakest point and there needs to be sufficient resources going towards for the whole fight of terrorism in that country, period. They make their decisions, though. That's their sovereignty, their sovereign right to make their decisions, what is appropriate, what's not. But I wanted to illuminate that it's going in the wrong direction now. ISIS is getting stronger. JNIM is getting stronger. Al-Qaeda in the lands of the Maghreb is getting stronger in that country.
And do you think it's getting stronger after General Traore took over?
It has. Just look at the numbers of attacks. It really has, since 2022. I've been tracking this since I took command. So, no ill will towards him, but the decisions is their own. They're looking for other ways to be able to, they're still on warfighting footing, but it's just going to take more resources.
So you stand by that statement? Because there's been pressure on you to walk those statements back.
That's my statement, that's my assessment. That is getting worse. More needs to be done for not just local, but whole of country, because of these violent extremist organizations are seeking revenue, they're seeking resources, they're seeking recruiting from the Burkinabe people, and they're seeking refuge within their country. That threatens their sovereignty.
Okay. And that threatens America's interest?
Say again?
Does that then threaten America's interests?
Yes, thank you for asking that. Because especially ISIS, and of course in East Africa is inextricably linked all the way to ISIS West Africa, ISIS Sahel, and there's going to be probably a move afoot for them to move and seek refuge within the line. So we have shared objectives, and we offer to work together with the Burkinabe government and border countries. Mali, Niger, coastal West Africa countries, collective, because here's what these organizations do. Here's what these terrorist organizations do. They seek refuge in the seams or the borders of these countries and lets them thrive and grow and lets them recruit, gain resources to carry on their illicit and nefarious activities against the populations, people.
And what would America, perhaps AFRICOM, be prepared to do? Would you be considering an ouster like we saw with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya? Because there's still many Africans who are yet to recover from that. If this is a bigger threat, as you say, in Burkina Faso, what is AFRICOM prepared to do about it?
We do indications and warnings. There's a number of activities that we do, and we'll just go ahead and mention building institutional capacity. There's not going to be U.S. boots on the ground. Very, very small for exchange of ideas and training, exercises. Over time, that builds institutional capacity and capability in these armies. There, AFRICOM, we are working towards a burden sharing and a burden shift for their independent operations. That's our goal. We have the shared objectives because these same terrorist groups can threaten our homeland. So we're in concert. I was just an African Lion over in Morocco. A number of countries working together to be able to do this.
Is Burkina Faso invited here today for this conference?
Yes. Yes.
The audacity of empire never ceases to amaze. On May 27th, 2025, General Michael Langley, the commander of the United States Africa Command, AFRICOM, sat down with Kenya's Citizen TV in Nairobi to defend his earlier slander against Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, Captain Ibrahim Traore. Langley's attempt to walk back his inflammatory remarks made during a US Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on April 3, 2025, only deepens the wound of Western hypocrisy. His accusations that Traoré misused Burkina Faso's gold reserves to protect his junta, rather than benefit the nation's 23 million citizens, sparked a firestorm of outrage across Africa. Now, after Africans rose in unison to defend their son, Traoré, Langley's feeble attempt to spin his narrative as a military perspective reeks of desperation. This is not just a story about one general's backpedaling, it's a glaring expose of the West's age-old playbook of destabilizing Africa to maintain its chokehold on the continent's resources and sovereignty. But this time, with revolutionary leaders like Traoré at the helm and a united African consciousness awakening, the West is finding its schemes faltering. Let's rewind to April 3, 2025. In the hallowed halls of the US Senate, General Langley, the first black four-star general in the US Marine Corps and AFRICOM's 6th commander, stood before the Senate Armed Services Committee. Responding to a question from Senator Roger Wicker about corruption linked to Chinese trade, Langley zeroed in on Burkina Faso's young leader. "Absolutely, Chairman, I see this and I don't mind calling it out," he declared with the arrogance of a colonial overseer. "Captain Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, their gold reserves are just in exchange to protect the junta regime." The words landed like a grenade across Africa. From Ouagadougou to Nairobi, from Lagos to Accra, the African continent erupted in righteous indignation. Social media platforms, X, TikTok, Instagram, became battlegrounds where Africans and the diaspora unleashed their fury. On X, posts decried Langley's remarks as a textbook case of Western interference, with one user framing it as "defenders of sovereignty branded as threats, the hypocrisy of General Langley's words on Burkina Faso." Another post thundered, "America is after Ibrahim Traoré to eliminate him just like they killed Gaddafi. If America touches Traoré, the AU must consider it a declaration of war against Africa." Protests erupted outside US embassies, with demonstrators in London and Ouagadougou waving placards reading "Hands off Ibrahim Traoré" and "No silence, no surrender." The Burkinabe government, led by the 36-year-old Traoré, the world's youngest head of state, swiftly condemned Langley's remarks as regrettable and gravely inaccurate. In a fiery response, Traoré declared, "We must choose to fight or we will remain slaves forever," invoking Burkina Faso's painful colonial history under French rule and his government's unyielding commitment to sovereignty. The Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, in South Africa echoed this sentiment, denouncing Langley's claims as a blatant imperialist tactic aimed at destabilizing a sovereign African state. The Alliance of Sahel States, AES, comprising Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, issued a joint statement slamming the US for its neo-colonial rhetoric and reaffirming their resolve to protect their resources and independence. Africans were not just angry, they were wounded. Langley's accusation wasn't merely a critique of Traoré's leadership, it was an assault on the aspirations of a continent striving to break free from centuries of exploitation. For decades, Western powers have plundered Africa's gold, diamonds and oil, leaving its people in poverty while foreign corporations grew fat.
Right, so it's about countries perhaps taking up their own autonomy. General, let's talk about countries taking on their own autonomy. You are on African soil, not for the first time, but this would be a good moment to ask about one of the countries that has taken its own autonomy, and that's Burkina Faso. Your remarks recently at the Senate seem to suggest that he's diverting, General Traoré, is diverting its 4 billion gold reserves to sustain his military rule rather than for public welfare. These remarks sparked widespread condemnation across the continent. What did you mean by that statement?
Let me speak to Burkina Faso's sovereignty. They maintain their sovereignty. They make their decisions how they use their resources. They make their decisions who their resources go to for military support. That's their sovereign right. But my cautionary tale was just from a military perspective. That was a Senate Armed Services Committee asking me a direct question. Burkina Faso, a lot of great things going on to progress them forward, okay? But then when you look at the military part of it, knowing that that's the epicenter of global terrorism, it was my time to illuminate that this is probably their weakest point, and there needs to be sufficient resources going towards for the whole fight of terrorism in that country, period. They make their decisions though. That's their sovereignty, their sovereign right to make their decisions, what is appropriate, what's not. But I wanted to illuminate that is going in the wrong direction now. ISIS is getting stronger. JNIM is getting stronger. Al-Qaeda in the lands of the Maghreb is getting stronger in that country.
And do you think it's getting stronger after General Traore took over?
It has. Just look at the numbers of attacks. It really has, since 2022. I've been tracking this since I took command. So, no ill will towards him, but the decisions is their own. They're looking for other ways to be able to, they're still on warfighting footing, but it's just going to take more resources.
So you stand by that statement? Because there's been pressure on you to walk those statements back.
That's my statement, that's my assessment. That is getting worse. More needs to be done for not just local, but whole of country, because of these violent extremist organizations are seeking revenue, they're seeking resources, they're seeking recruiting from the Burkinabe people, and they're seeking refuge within their country. That threatens their sovereignty.
And that threatens America's interest?
Say again?
Does that then threaten America's interests?
Yes, thank you for asking that. Because especially ISIS, and of course in East Africa is inextricably linked all the way to ISIS West Africa, ISIS Sahel, and there's going to be probably a move afoot for them to move and seek refuge within the line. So we have shared objectives, and we offer to work together with the Burkinabe government and border countries. Mali, Niger, coastal West Africa countries, collective, because here's what these organizations do. Here's what these terrorist organizations do. They seek refuge in the seams or the borders of these countries and lets them thrive and grow and lets them recruit, gain resources to carry on their illicit and nefarious activities against the populations of those people.
And what would America, perhaps AFRICOM, be prepared to do? Would you be considering an ouster like we saw with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya? Because there's still many Africans who are yet to recover from that. If this is a bigger threat, as you say, in Burkina Faso, what is AFRICOM prepared to do about it?
We do indications and warnings. There's a number of activities that we do, and we'll just go ahead and mention building institutional capacity. There's not going to be U.S. boots on the ground. Very, very small for exchange of ideas and training, exercises. Over time, that builds institutional capacity and capability in these armies. There, AFRICOM, we are working towards a burden sharing and a burden shift for their independent operations. That's our goal. We have the shared objectives because these same terrorist groups can threaten our homeland. So we're in concert. I was just in African Lion over in Morocco a number of countries working together to be able to
Is Burkina Faso invited here today for this conference?
Yes, yes. They were invited to African Lion in Morocco. Yeah. Yes, yeah. Like I said, we're moving forward.
Okay.
We're moving forward because we have that shared goal of defeating terrorism.
All right. Speaking of that, because the reaction out of the statements that you made about Burkina Faso were several African leaders feeling you are speaking on sovereignty issues that America shouldn't be. And as a result, there are those who see the role of Africa as less of a partner in, the war against, shared threats, as you mentioned, and more of a protector of Western or American economic interests that allows access to Africa's vast mineral resources, and as more of a paternalistic relationship than one of respect amongst peers. What would you respond to that?
I respond that there's others on the globe that do that. There's others on the globe that do that. I'm going to even bring it up. We should have even already know, okay? But I'm going to even bring that up.
Okay.
We respect the sovereignty. We respect their decisions. We respect their decisions of who they choose as a security partner. And then we measure the common denominator that's keeping these countries across the Sahel from progressing forward. In 2050, the largest workforce on the globe is going to come out of the continent of Africa. The youth need hope. They need peace and stability so they can hit their potentials. That's a long-range goal of AFRICOM as we look to help these countries set those conditions for stability and security so prosperity can be presented to all the populations and the youth. Pan-Africanism is real and it's strong, and there's an opportunity to come up on the global stage, and this continent can do it. That's what we really envision.
So you're not concerned about China and Russia expanding their military and economic influence across the continent?
We are concerned about it, yes.
What about it concerns you?
Well, their influence. Their influence may not be looked upon as being a positive influence.
For who? For America or for Africa?
Well, for Africans, okay? And then, so Americans have that in mind, that for the African people and across all countries, be able to hit their maximum potential and independence and sovereignty and also freedoms by rules-based international order, being able to get on the global stage and take a leadership role and provide for the people in peace and stability. Some of those aims are not the same as the approach of those other countries on the global stage.
There's a lot of work that's done here, and we're here to speak about why he's here in the country and what big conference is happening in the country at the moment. General, thank you very much for making time for us on Citizen Television.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Let's begin by understanding why you're here. There is the Chiefs of Defense Forces conference. Tell us about that and what role AFRICOM is playing.
Well, for U.S. AFRICOM, we yearly put on the Chief of Defense Conference. When I first took command back in 2022, we had a conference in Rome. And I said, you know what? That's fine and good. Everyone wants to go to Rome, but I saw that this conference is for the African Chiefs of Defense. It should be on the continent. And we went to have our own last year in Botswana. And it really opened things up to address issues, military issues, security issues, shared objectives of how to achieve security and stability across the continent. So that was a purpose. And now we're here in Kenya. And as I had discussions with the Chad, General Kariri, he says, yes, I would love to host this conference. So it's an ownership by the chiefs of defense across Africa. And here we are.
Tell us about the relationship between, Africa and, of course, the various militaries around Africa. And we'll come to Kenya in a moment. But speak to us about the cooperation and the support that's been provided. How would you categorize that?
Oh, wow. It's broad and wide as far as our engagement with the militaries across the continent, across the regions from North Africa to Southern Africa, East and West. We deepen our partnerships with various countries and their militaries to build towards what we see first as security comes first. For good governance and to institutionalize the militaries is the first step to be able to get stability and also prosperity for countries. That's where we engage with various countries across West Africa and East Africa and across the Maghreb as well, and then in Southern Africa. We've been building on these relationships for years, since 2007, 2008, engaging with various African countries that have shared objectives, shared values in our approach to the threats, but also to explore the opportunities.
Okay. What's the shared objective with Kenya? We know we recently got major non-NATO ally status. How do you see that from a military and security perspective?
Well, the KDF, the Kenyan Defense Forces, have a reputation here in East Africa as a leader and security exporter. They are an anchor country, the KDF, in being able to, whether it was a few iterations ago of the Somalia mission, and then of late, ATMIS forces, and now awesome. Every one of those iterations, Kenya was there. I meet with President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed on numerous occasions, and he speaks very highly of the brothers and sisters in arms on his border in Kenya and their leadership, and how his Somali National Army depend on them to be able to be the leaders of institutionalizing and professionalizing the forces. Kenya does that so well.
What do you see then, now that we're talking about Somalia, let's speak about that for a moment. Now, it was ATMIS, there's been the drawdown from that. Yes. How would you assess the capacity of the army and the military there towards upholding security? Because, like you say, that's something that's shared between Kenya and Somalia.
It ebbs and flows, especially during major transitions. And, point be known, I know that there was, at the first of the year, just a number of political type things, and I don't really get into that would affect overall security and the ability for the Somali National Army to perform, because there were some unknowns. And so whether it was between Somalia or the federal member states or the Somali national government and outwardly to other countries, there was things that they had to work out. That had effect on operations. I'm thinking they're getting past that, but the most pressing piece that stressed their continuation of operations was a transition from ATMIS to AWESOM at the first of the year. And anytime there's change, there is a ability for the adversaries to exploit that gap or seam in time and push their operations, trying to be able to get a foothold and take the fight to the Somali National Army. That's what we're seeing now. But this is a very resilient force. Fourth generation, a number of partners are helping to be able to recreate what they've achieved in the last couple of years across central Somalia and even into the south.
Why do you think the threat remains so persistent decades on? There's been quite a bit of work that's been done in Somalia. AFRICOM has played a very central role. Why do you think the threat of terror remains persistent, and what is the end game? What does that look like?
Well, part of it is Al-Shabaab, long-standing terrorist organization, sponsored by Al-Qaeda. They want to be able to use their operations, their information operations, become that shadow governance, illicit activities, nefarious activities, preying upon the people across Somalia, the marginalized clans, with false narratives and saying that they're here and they can provide better than the government. So they've been doing that for a number of years. They've been doing a number of, within their own funding type, really pressing some of the clans for resources, actually just capturing resources, taxes, illegal taxation on these members, and saying that they are going to be the provider when they're actually not. So the federal government of Somalia has been very active at trying to downplay that and doing assurance actions, getting out in the community. So through their liberation phases and stability operations, they bring their whole of government in providing services, education, to connect with the outer regions across Haran, Galmudug, and other regions across Somalia.
I want us to focus now because there's a lot happening in the region, and a lot of that affects the peace and security and stability of Kenya being central in the region. I'd like us to focus now for a moment on Sudan. The crisis there now in its second year. Two sides in this conflict, one indicted for crimes against humanity in Darfur, the other is facing legitimacy questions due to a coup. In this divide, General Langley, does AFRICOM have a side?
Well, that's a policy question. Right now, we want peace because, point being known, these atrocities and this civil war since 15 April 2023, and the displaced population from the Darfur region into other countries, it's a travesty. The casualties there are equivalent to any other place on the globe. And that story needs to be told. Burhan and Hemeti going at it, two warlords that actually was a coup within itself. It was supposed to be civilian governance. It was supposed to be elections. And then war broke out. Who suffered from that? The people of Sudan suffered from that. So we're trying to push for peace. There needs to be coming. So that's in our policy realms and diplomatic realms of those leaders across the globe, to get them to come to the table. There was atrocities on both sides.
And what role is AFRICOM playing, if any, behind the scenes? This
is strict. This is at the higher level. Okay. As far as the diplomatic piece, we don't have a military role there.
Do you see the Sudan conflict as posing a great security threat in the Horn of Africa? Or how would you assess, that situation?
It could emanate.
Yeah.
It can emanate, just the instability there, and could affect more migration, whether that migration goes east, west, or even north, of displaced populations, has reverberating effects across other communities that stokes conflict. We see that even down south when you look at the DRC and the M23 and displacing, as they marched upon Goma, displaced populations. It affects people's lives and stability. And when populations move, it disrupts where their in location is because there's not the capacity to provide for them. So we look at those reverberating type effects, cascading effects, if you will, and it happens and it has a threat of happening across the region. For example, populations coming out of the Darfur region and going into Chad is disrupted. They may not have the necessary type services to be able to accommodate those populations.
So you say you're not present on the ground, but is Africa monitoring the flow of arms, external influence in this conflict, including the latest reported use of chemical weapons by the RSF?
Well, you know that the U.S. is considering sanctions. So, yes, that's at the higher levels. Those policies, those decisions are the White House, but at AFRICOM, we need to be able to do indications and warnings of that.
Are you concerned?
Watch what's going on. Say again?
Are you seeing anything that concerns
Well,
you?
we report that to our government.
Okay.
We report that for our government. So it's public now that we are investigating the use of those chemicals. So that's where our U.S. government takes over. The number of communities across the leadership, the UN, they look into these things and they do extensive measures to be able to investigate it.
Okay. I want us to talk a little bit broadly now, because we're focused on the crisis in Sudan, the war on terror, across the border in Somalia. But do you see, a threat beyond the reference to terrorism? What do you think is the greatest threat in the region at the moment, beyond the common reference, for instance, to terror?
Well, I would just say just a number of layered threats that I see across the Sahel that emanates downward and could even rise up and back into the Maghreb. When conditions are met, it could exacerbate more instability across a population. That's why I always said that when we look for a solution set, and we're going to be able to table this issue again at this Chad conference, what is the enduring solution for terrorism? As we learned a lot of lessons, what came out of the Levant, out of the Middle East, and Syria and Iraq, and it emanated downward. Because it's important that I put this statistic out there. In 2007, the global percentage of terrorism on the African continent was 2%. 2024, it's like 43%. It migrated down. That ideology migrated down, and some fighters did come through the Maghreb. Just a number of things, the Arab Spring, and the Libya downfall, but that narrative came down into the Sahel. So we're finding out that this jihad and this Islamic extremism kind of resonates with some of the populations and the marginalized populations across the Sahel, and it took hold. And it turned very toxic. It turned to an atrocity, whereas these armed gangs took on a caliphate, a desire for a caliphate, which really stoked terrorism. So how do these countries meet this? There's a number of ways. None are modeling a simulation. This is not just kinetics. It's not just being able to have offensive operations to clear. It's a whole of government approach by these African countries, building in education systems, building in the true sense of religion in these populations and providing services so these military-age males are not indoctrinated into terrorist activities.
Yeah. Is that a change of approach, I think, with AFRICOM? Because we've heard of a move towards, perhaps from the whole government approach that you speak to what I've heard termed as burden sharing. Is there a change?
Yes, it is moving to burden sharing.
Explain to us what that means.
So we did whole of government approach, and then we know that change of administrations went and they said, okay, let's look at what we've been doing and let's select out what has been working and let's get laser focus on being able to be straight with our partners that have been building capacity and shifting and sharing of a burden. So a number of our partners have that capacity with other allies that collectively can still build that model. Number of examples in West Africa that are in the process of rebuilding this. But the model is effective when you take into account of the whole community that's been affected by terrorism.
So it's them taking that up for themselves. What does that look like, perhaps more specifically? Because
we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's the rollout plan?
They understand.
For that? Yeah.
Yes. I met with a number of ministers of defense and some presidents and chiefs of defense, and I said, hey, there's a change of our approach. We're going to help you where we can. We do have different priorities, but we're still here for you. We still want you to lead it because you understand your consequences better than anyone. We don't prescript anything in AFRICOM. When I go and I call it a campaign of learning. And people thought, yeah, he's doing a campaign of learning in his first year of AFRICOM. No, I've been doing a campaign of learning throughout. When I sit down with MODs, chiefs of defense or presidents, I learn from them. I learn from them. They tell me what their approach is to terrorism. And I figure out, and they tell me how AFRICOM can help.
Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm your host Beryl. Thank you so much guys for the many subscribers, for the many views, for the many likes. We are actually doing wonderfully in this great channel just because of you. For those commenting, I see like sometimes YouTube is like hiding the comments when I try to reply. They just kind of disappear, and it's something I'm working on. I reached out to them. I'm just hoping that they will respond. Another thing that I want to say is our videos are doing wonderfully just because you are there. You've been watching, you've been sharing the content. Yay! So we're almost there, guys. We're almost hitting our 1-year anniversary. Yeah. So what I can say right now is the channel is doing fantastic. We're doing great. We are right now in the morning 266 subscribers. Yes, we said that by at least August, when we celebrate our 1-year anniversary, we will be at 500 subs, and that's because of you. So let's dive straight into what we need to discuss today. Yeah, we are tired of betrayal, guys. Tired of false representation. Tired of black faces who reach the top only to turn their backs on the very people who lifted them. This isn't just frustration. This is actually rage. righteous, unfiltered, and overdue. Today, guys, we talk about what happens when power corrupts, when prestige replaces purpose, when General Michael Langley, the first black four-star general in the United States Marines, threatens a black journalist, not an enemy, not a traitor, but one of his own. Got me wrong, but that's what exactly is going on. So this journalist wasn't asking for favors, he was asking for answers, but instead of the accountability, he got threats. Instead of respect, he got intimidation. Let that sink in. A man in uniform, a man who very rise was celebrated as a win for black people, chose to silence black truth instead of standing in it. And we ask again, guys, what good is a black face in a high place if it doesn't protect black voices? Yeah, we've seen this before: politicians, general CEOs climbing up the ladder, then kicking it down behind them, swearing allegiance to power, not to people, wearing the skin, not carrying the soul. Mhm. This journalist actually spoke out, and in doing so, he spoke for all of us. When the journalist spoke, they actually spoke for all of us. For every voice ignored, for every truth dismissed, for every sellout, we were too polite to check. And now it's been revealed. Guys, let this be a lesson. Position doesn't equal purpose. Rank does not equal righteousness. And not all skinfolk are kinfolk. We need leaders who are unbowed, unbossed, and unafraid. Because real power isn't in uniforms or titles. Real power is actually in the truth. Yeah. And truth doesn't threaten. It actually gives people freedom. It liberates. Huh? It makes people grow. That is what truth is. So if you are black and in power, listen closely. We don't need your symbolism. We need your solidarity. We don't need your we don't need you to represent us in rooms. We need you to stand with us in those rooms. Okay? Because the next generation is actually watching, and we will not celebrate like your success while you silence our struggle. We are tired of black sellouts, and we are wide awake. Okay? So that's exactly what this video compilation is talking about. And I'm actually I'm from Kenya, by the way. So this interview that you watched is, I know it's shocking, and it's why we needed to share this video, because we need other people to see exactly what's going on in the world, what Langley is actually talking about. So just because someone looks like us doesn't mean that they stand with us. Representation is meaningless without accountability and integrity. You can see that with you know who. Okay? Just because of the same skin color doesn't mean that this person is actually ours, and that sucks. It's not okay, guys. It's not. We need to be united in order to win this battle. We are at the bottom of the food chain. So if we stand together, we can make it. But if we are divided, how will we make it? Right? Power doesn't actually equal loyalty. That is another lesson we can pick from this story. Climbing the ladder in white dominated systems often comes with a lot of pressure to actually change, assimilate, comply, and protect the status quo. But what we must recognize is that some individuals choose power over people, and we must hold them accountable. You know who I'm talking about. We must hold them accountable when they do. We also must protect independent black voices. For example, our journalists, storytellers, and creators who speak the truth and are often silenced, threatened, or discredited, especially by those within like ranks, or those who've been corrupted by power. You get, like, I'm from Kenya and I'm airing this. I don't know what repercussions might be there, but I want you to help me protect independent black voices. Free black media. Free black media is vital, very important. We must defend it at all cost. Okay? Yeah, guys, so those are some of the things that we actually looked into. This situation is actually a wake-up call. We're not just fighting racism, we're fighting internalized oppression, co-opted leadership, and the illusion of progress. The lesson? We need to stay sharp, stay vocal, and never put symbolism over substance. Okay, guys. So let me know if you'd like to add actual quotes from the video. Let me just know what you'd like about this. Okay, guys. Please tell us. I would like you to actually just drop a comment on what you think about Langley and Ibrahim Traore and all this interview, and what you think the world should be ready for. Please, Black Truth Matters. Langley has been called out for his behavior, and now he's focusing on Ibrahim Traore. Even if that even if Ibrahim Traore has like focusing on gold in his country, but why not measure on what you need to measure on? Why are you getting involved? Because you know what people always do, when they see something good, they want to focus on that and take it away, and that is not a good thing. Okay, build your own country. You want to murder your own country, make America great again. Why are you coming back to Africa with all those, sending out people who you actually took forcefully? It's not fair. So people like Langley need to actually change, focus on what's right and what's good for black people in this world. Guys, subscribe if you're done with fake leaders and ready for real change. Drop a comment, share this video, and we are wide awake. Thank you, guys. I hope you have a lovely rest of your time. Bye bye.